I'm Yvan De Baets of Belgium's Brasserie de la Seine, and this is the Brewer to Brewer podcast from All About Beer. My guest is Jennings Carney of Perre, and he is here for a conversation that goes beyond the brew house and into topics that matter to brewing professionals and curious beer drinkers. First, please visit allaboutbeer.com and follow on social media at allaboutbeer. And to support journalism in the beer space, check out patreon.com/allaboutbeer. We'll get into the conversation in just a moment, but first, this message.
This episode is brought to you by Osmanthus Flowers. Osmanthus radiates fresh floral spring like no other flower. Add Osmanthus to lambics, lagers, pilsners, wit beers, or other Belgian styles. First Tea is your source for Osmanthus and teas that fit the unique flavor profiles you're looking for. Email info@firsttea.com, that's FIRSDTEA, to discover the perfect teas and botanicals for your next project.
For more than a decade, the Beer Law Center has been dedicated to the craft beverage industry, meeting the legal needs of breweries, wineries, distilleries, and all manner of alcohol producers and sellers around the country. From company formation to federal and state licensing, trademarks, regulations, and compliance, or if you're buying or selling an alcohol business, the Beer Law Center should be your first call. The firm never charges for an initial consultation, and if they can't help you, they'll help you find someone that can. Have a legal question? Contact the Beer Law Center on social media at Beer Law Center and online at beerlawcenter.com.
Ironheart Canning is the quality leader in mobile canning and much more. With a decade of packaging experience, Ironheart is your turnkey solution for all your canning needs. Ironheart has no minimums on their mobile service, great supply chain quality control like no other, as well as technical support programs. Need canning materials? Ironheart has you covered with cans by the pallet or the trailer load, Pactex case trays, and can ends as well. Ironheart Canning. You have the capability because Ironheart can do it for you. Visit them at ironheartcanning.com or email info@ironheartcanning.com.
Malteurop Malting Company is based in North America, specializing in growing and producing quality malts for the craft beer and distilling industries. With local farms and malt houses spread across the United States, Canada, and Mexico, MMC's commitment to excellence is fully ingrained into every batch it produces, ensuring breweries and distilleries of any size can create the finest beverages on the planet. Visit malteuropmaltingco.com to learn how Malt Europe can support your malting needs. Or you can contact them at customer success@malteurope.com or call 844-546-MALT for questions or to place your order. Malt Europe, premium grains from field to flavor.
Okay, let's get into it. A bit about my guest today. Jennings Carney grew up in the foothills of Virginia at the base of the Shenandoah National Park in Rappahannock County, Virginia. For 20 years, Jennings toured in the psyche rock band Pontiac, excellent band by the way, with whom his brother Lane and Van formed in Baltimore in 2004. Jennings began brewing in late 2010 and quickly found his calling when on tour he drank a glass of Gueuze. Jennings and his brothers founded Perre Brewing in the summer of 2015. The brewery focuses on traditional method, spontaneous and native yeast beers. Since January of 2016, the brothers have used a native Saccharomyces caught in the wild for the only yeast source the brewery pitches in their beers, aside from their spontaneous. The yeast is not plated out or banked in a lab, and it never has and never will be. It is propagated by brewing batches of beer. Perre uses a wood-fired brewhouse outside. Jennings brews in all weather, only stopping when there is lightning. The system is a 10 barrels brewhouse with a coolship. All the native yeast beers are carbonated with a pet-nat approach, using the native yeast ability to eat all the sugar in the beers to create the tiniest of bubbles. Well, Jennings, welcome to the show. I'm super happy to have you here today with us. And I have to say that if I proposed you and your brewery for the show today is because that I really believe that with the people of Scratch Brewing, with whom we had a cool conversation 2 weeks ago, you are one of the most interesting American brewers of the last decades. And I have to say, I really love your approach. It's a very refreshing approach that goes beyond the brewing books. You have a creativity, a type of creativity that I would call noble creativity. It means that you are not trying to throw a pizza slice or any crap into a beer and call yourself innovative. No, you go somehow back to the roots of what our ancestors did, using natural ways of making beer with almost a philosophical approach that I really appreciate. And I also, of course, appreciate your beers. Could you tell us a little bit about how you started and maybe what's your first experience with the gueuze you had in my country a few years ago? What created it in your brain?
Well, Yvan, I want to start by saying the honor and the pleasure is all mine. You have been a huge inspiration on me, and in our conversations, I want to say that I can't imagine modern craft beer or modern gueuze or lambic or wild beers without your scholarship, your insight, and your inspiration. So it is because of you that partly that I am here. So thank you so much.
Thanks, man. I'm
Yeah,
honored too.
you're kind of one of my superheroes, dude.
Wow. Stop it.
Well, so yeah, the gueuze, but to get to it, the gueuze, my brothers and I were on tour in Ghent, and I can't remember the year. It was just around the time that I started brewing, and we had just gone and seen the triptych of the Van Eyck triptych, in the cathedral there. And we had come out and we were sitting in the square, and my brother Van had bought a round of beer for us, and that beer happened to be a gueuze. And when I drank it, all the hairs on my arm stood up, and I didn't have any reference point for that beer. I had never had that kind of. I mean, I'd had lambics before, but I'd never had gueuze specifically. And so when I drank it, it sent this like alarm bell system off in my brain, and I had to figure out like what this was. So I asked Van what it was, and he said, "Oh, this is gueuze." And I said, "Well, what's gueuze?" And then he explained it to me, and that kind of started the path. And when we started brewing with professionally in our brewery, I knew, and my brothers knew, that that's what we wanted to make, and we knew that it was going to take quite a long time to get to a place where the gueuze and the lambic inspired beers that we were making were going to be good. I mean, it takes a really long time to get there, and I feel like I'm maybe just starting to get there. Maybe we'll see.
Okay. What were the main challenges that you faced in your location and with your methods? We talked first about the spontaneous fermentation, but I want to come back with your approach for the other beers, which is extremely interesting too.
Sure. Yeah. So with the spontaneous, the initial problem was, like, for instance, because we followed the what we thought and what has now become the quote unquote traditional method. The beers that we were producing at first weren't sufficiently tart. So like we would just drink them, and there would be like a Brettanomyces character to them, but there would be no actual tart like quality to them. And the beers that we were cool shipping in January and in like December, January, and early February were all basically oxidizing and not really turning out very well.
Right.
And so
because it was too cold in your location, maybe?
Yeah, I think it was too cold, I think, ultimately. And we were cool shipping outside. So like we weren't letting the wort cool inside. Our cool ships were outside. So a lot of times I'd come out in the mornings, and in Celsius, our our wort was 0.
Mhm.
You know, and it was like gelatinous, and it would take like, you know, 2 weeks to warm up to the brewery temperature, and then it would start to ferment.
Mm.
So we changed the calendar for cool shipping for basically mid-February through basically late April. And as long as the nights are cold enough for, you know, Fahrenheit, it's in the low 40s. It's fine. And
Mhm.
and we found that we got really, really good results because of that. And then we moved locations 4 years ago, right at the beginning of pandemic. And since then, actually, this location has proved to be quite wonderful, and we're getting a lot of really nice acid production. And we're getting a lot of really nice barrels now. So I'm very happy with where we are. And in fact, this year I just bottled, well, not just, but this year's Goose inspired beer is a 1, 2, and 4 year, and it's 100% all from this new location. So the oldest beer was from 2020. I'm really happy with how it turned out. But again, some of the challenges that we're facing now are that the fruited beers, and even to a degree, some of the blended multi-vintage beers, the Goose inspired beers, weren't carbonating as much because of bacteria. So I've been messing around with some experiments with that as well. Once we put them into bottle and we age them. But I have found that as a side note, I've started opening some beers from 2020, and they are really great. So, and I opened a creek that we had made from 2017, and it was quite wonderful. So I think they just kind of take some time, but that's
Yeah.
what they were designed to do, right? As you know, they're designed to age.
That really makes sense. Yeah, it makes sense. And I can't wait to trying those beers in a few days, actually, because for auditors, actually, I will be visiting Jennings and his brothers next Saturday, actually, and we'll spend a few days together. And they came to brew with me a few weeks ago, so it's a coincidence that we can brew together in a so short time frame, but it's extremely cool.
Yes, it's awesome.
Yeah. You were talking about moving from a new place, but what did actually really change in your environment? You think that created a better beer and you got that tartness?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And can you hear me okay?
Yeah, perfectly.
Okay, great. You know, that's a really good question. I don't know specifically what happened with the location.
Can you
in terms of
describe
why?
the differences, like physically? I mean, more trees,
Sure.
more wood, more something, less of something, or
Yeah, for sure. I'd say up here, there's a couple things. There's more wind. There's a lot more wind. We're directly under some wild fruit trees.
oh yeah,
So there's which I'll show you when we brew. There's a bunch of wild cherry trees and also some native service berries, which are a native small little fruit that's here.
yeah.
And I don't know. I you know, ultimately, Yvonne, I think it has something to do with maybe just like there's a lot of wind up here because we also have an orchard, an apple orchard that we planted specifically because of like the winds that we get. And so maybe that has something to do with it.
Certainly.
But you know, the wind, the river is still here. But also, this is really interesting too. Our water changed. So our water now is quite soft. And I know that the water in Brussels is pretty hard.
Yes.
The water that we have here now is super soft. Like not as soft as Pilsen, but getting pretty close to Pilsen.
Oh,
so
right.
I don't.
Because it's coming from the mountains or something?
Yeah, there's a really interesting basically the way the water table works here is that it's kind of like a giant slow moving river, but it's very wide. So depending on where you're pulling the water from in your well, the chemistry is going to change. And so we had It's about an 80-meter deep well, and it goes through bedrock. So, and
Mhm.
I'll show you, our filters are completely clear. Like, we don't do anything to our water. It's
Wow.
totally clear.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay. So this is about the spontaneous beer, but one of your most fascinating approach is the yeast that you found and selected in the wild, and how you use it, and also your strange for the classic brewers cleaning procedures. Can you tell us more about that?
Sure. Yeah. So my brother Lane gets credit for harvesting the yeast that we captured in late winter of 2015, and we got about 50 samples from outside the brewery, and out of those 50 samples, about 10 of them really worked, and from those 10, 3 of them seemed to send off like those precursors that we're looking for, like black olive and vinyl and things of that nature. When the Saccharomyces is stressed, and then out of those 3, we realized that they were all kind of starting to act in similar ways, so we combined them, and that was the inception of our native yeast.
Mhm.
And at first, it was a highly aggressive yeast that would eat all the sugar within a very, very short period of time.
Mhm.
And since then, it has kind of become a little bit lazy. So if I'm making our blonde beer, which is called the Golden Swan, which is 100% Pilsner, it will finish out in about anywhere from 4 to 6 days, and it will stop around 2 Plato. And then what I'll do is I'll take it and I'll put that beer straight into a bottle or a keg, and then I will let it condition for an additional 3 to 4 weeks to 5 weeks. I mean, after 5 weeks, it gets to a place where it's starting to lose the sugar because it'll continue to eat, and that's how we carbonate our beer.
Mhm.
And the yeast will continue from 2 Plato down to 0 eventually. So I'm about 98 to 99% certain that we also have native Brettanomyces in our culture.
Mhm.
Now, like when that kicks in versus when the when the native Saccharomyces decides not to, I guess it's up for debate. But I do drink beers of ours that are about 8 months old, that I would say is like when it's like great, perfect, awesome.
Mhm.
And it's wonderful. It's very carbonated. It's not like, I don't know, it just tastes like a great saison, I guess.
Mhm.
But if you get it very early on, it's very clean and it lagers very well. So here at the brewery, I usually, after about 3 weeks from time of brewing, I'll put it in the walk-in, and then we'll serve it. And when people come in and looking for like a quote unquote Pilsner, I don't really say anything. I just give it to them, drink it.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
great.
Okay, cool. And so for me to understand well, we talk about a consortium of different yeast. It's not only one strain; it's different yeast. And have you tried to categorize them and to do some genetic research, or you just don't care, which is a good answer also. I mean,
Yeah. Yvonne, it's a good question. I mean, we've never run any genetic tests on it. I would be interested to see like what it is specifically. I mean, it
Mhm.
could be, I mean, there's 2 ways of thinking about it. One is I would be very interested. And the other is, even if it's something as mundane as just regular Saccharomyces cerevisiae, it's still really tasty, and why I caught it. So
Mhm.
whatever it is, it's really tasty, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I mean, we've just never gone through we've just never gone through all the steps to actually get like a PCR test and like run it out,
Mhm.
what it is genetically. But it'd be really interesting to see. I mean, for 2 years, um, every winter we would not use our heat exchanger, and we would just use the cool ship. So
Uh-huh.
all of our like all of our beer, even the clean beer, was just cool shipped.
Mhm.
And we pushed it a little too far. So we were cool shipping in like May.
Mhm. Oh, wow.
And we did pick up some pretty aggressive bacteria, and so we had to wash it in order to clean it up. But yeah.
And when you brew in winter time, do you get any bacteria, or do you check your yeasts, whatever, under the microscope at all, or not? Have you seen her? Have you seen them? I don't know how to put it. And have you mentioned some things that could be bacteria?
Yeah. So
Winter
we
time,
used to. Yes, we used to look. We have plated. We have plated her out, as you would say, and she does look like Saccharomyces.
Okay.
Yeah, pretty classic Saccharomyces. In terms of like the bacteria, like when we propagate from, basically what I do I want to say every 2 months or 3 months. I will essentially start over with a small, like 500 milliliter sample, and I'll just grow it back up again with carboys before a brew day, and then get it up to a level, and then maybe do a couple like half batches of, instead of brewing, like we have a 10-barrel system. So functionally it's a 10-barrel system, but I brew like 8 barrels. So I might brew like a 4-barrel system on a Monday, and then I'll brew like another 4 barrels on a Tuesday, after I will have taken the weekend to step it up from like, a half a liter. And so it's incredibly healthy, vibrant yeast. And that we have a kind of a joke around here that we have isolation through propagation. Because if you're taking your yeast and you're just constantly feeding it and giving the Saccharomyces what she wants all the time, it's going to, by nature, kind of push everything else out.
Yeah. That's for me a fascinating approach. And for audience to understand better, can you tell us about your way of cleaning your vessels? If you didn't change it since last time we spoke about it, I think it's a really fascinating approach.
Oh, you mean like aside from PBW?
Like, sorry, I didn't get you on that one.
Oh,
PBW.
sorry. So aside from like so we use PBW.
What is PBW? I'm sorry.
Oh, so it's like a very, like, it's like OxyClean. It's a mild wash.
Okay.
Yeah. But other than that, we will just get in and scrub it out with like mild soap and hot water.
Okay. No, that's what I think is really, really interesting, because we can say that you don't have like a hard cleaning, right? And you don't use strong acid to potentially destroy the calcium oxalate or things like that could harbor yeast and bacteria. So it's kind of a soft cleaning. Is it right to say so?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, so we do use acid on kegs, right? Like on the inside of kegs.
That's another story.
Like,
I'm talking about fermenters and lagering tanks, for instance.
Oh yeah, no, we don't use any. No.
And it seems that I remember that you told me that in your conception, in your philosophy, you consider that because you found a wild local yeast, that she has to be strong against the other yeast or bacteria that could bother her, and that's she's the strong one, so she like developed herself in the niche that is your brewery and the surroundings, and she can easily fight against the invaders, and that you didn't see dramatic changes in the flavor of the beers, and obviously it's still your yeast that takes the lead.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment for sure. Like we keep a very clean operation, as you'll see. So our tanks are clean for sure. But the philosophy is that most of the time, using modern science now, I think we can all understand how microbiology works. And so if you have a clean surface and you're using a robust yeast, your yeast is going to win out, especially if the yeast that you're using is the wild yeast that wanted to infect the beer in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. I think it totally makes sense. And this is, we are really talking about brewing philosophy here, and it's rare that we kind of do kind of conversations in the modern times. When I listen to you, I have sometimes the impression that I hear about that I'm listening to an old ancient brewer of the ancient days. And believe me, in my mouth, it's a very nice quality,
Oh,
and I'm
cool.
very happy about that. And it's thanks to people like you that I understand. I understood lots of things in my research, and I could better understand how the beers were made in the past. And you know, when you read old books like from some 100 years ago, you can easily think that all the beers were infected and undrinkable. But I think that the ancient brewers had approaches that were very similar to yours. And I always say that, and it's not your case because you know the why, but the ancient brewers, they didn't know the why of the things, but they knew the how very well. And you have an approach like that, which is very close to nature, to your environment, and also I think, but tell me if I'm wrong, to your own intuition, and you must be using your senses way more than a lot of modern brewers these days. And I think that this is very interesting. You will feel when something is wrong in your brewery. I'm certain of that.
Oh, well, thanks, Yvonne. Yeah, no, I think you're right. You know, I think you're right when you talk about this conception of the idea that, you know, if we were to go back 100, 150 years, that the beers that we would drink would all be infected or whatever. I mean, I think it's a really interesting and strong point because humans are humans, and we're not going to ingest things that don't taste good,
Exactly.
right? Yeah. So it's like, you know, I was just reading this morning with my coffee. I was reading I think we've been talking about the new Lambic book that Rafe Amir has been writing and put out. And one of the things I was reading this morning was how the cool ship and the brew house was cleaned before the brew actually started. And you know, we're talking like the late 18th century. Nobody knew about microbiology in the way that we understand now, but they did understand that if you take like boiling hot water and throw it over something and scrub it down and clean it, like you're going to get better results than if you don't do things like that.
Exactly.
And yeah, and you're right in the sense that, like, I think that my brother Lane has always said that, you know, brewing is cooking, you're making a food product. And I think it's really important to always to smell, to touch, to taste, to see like what it is. Like it's a process that all along the way, if you're not deeply connected to it, then it's gonna go weird at some point if you're not always aware. Like, yes, you're right. I think there is a level of intuition, and when you take that intuition out, you have to rely on systems that are no longer analog and infinite. And you start to get into binary systems, like what chemicals do we use? Is it clean? Is it sanitized? You know, those kinds of things. And I'm not saying that those processes are not important and useful for certain applications. I do think that there is room and space for people to get back to, and I don't know what, you know, like what kind of scale you can take this to, but you can certainly have a functioning brewery running without the use of as many chemicals as people are using today. And I think sometimes it just takes a little bit of stepping back and saying, well, what am I trying to do exactly? Like, what kind of beer am I trying? And you know, how do I want to present this beer? You know?
Yeah, totally. This is why I was speaking about the refreshing ideas that you have, and it's good because you're totally aware that, okay, in some instances it's important to clean the modern way and stuff, but you keep that proximity to your product that some of us are sometimes losing. It's super cool to have lots of sensors and measurement all over, but if you lose your senses in your brewery. You're no longer in connection with your beer, and I think that we have a lot of things to be taught from your approach about that. So it's very interesting. We are going to take a short break for this message and then come right back for more of this conversation with Jennings Carney.
Brewers across the globe have leveraged the popularity of osmanthus-scented beers. Now, First Tea is bringing that clean, natural flower to North America. Email info@firsttea.com, that's FIRSDTEA, to find out how to use this delicate flower in lagers, wit beers, and more.
For more than a decade, the Beer Law Center has been dedicated to the craft beverage industry, meeting the legal needs of breweries, wineries, distilleries, and all manner of alcohol producers and sellers around the country. From company formation to federal and state licensing, trademarks, regulations, and compliance, or if you're buying or selling an alcohol business, the Beer Law Center should be your first call. The firm never charges for an initial consultation, and if they can't help you, they'll help you find someone that can. Have a legal question? Contact the Beer Law Center on social media at Beer Law Center and online at beerlawcenter.com.
Malteurop Malting Company is based in North America, specializing in growing and producing quality malts for the craft beer and distilling industries. With local farms and malt houses spread across the United States, Canada, and Mexico, MMC's commitment to excellence is fully ingrained into every batch it produces, ensuring breweries and distilleries of any size can create the finest beverages on the planet. Visit malteuropmaltingco.com to learn how Malteurop can support your malting needs. Or you can contact them at customersuccess@malteurop.com or call 844-546-MALT for questions or to place your order. Malteurop, premium grains from field to flavor.
Welcome back. All right, Jennings. Very interesting things that you were telling us. I have a question about the house character of your yeast, about the flavor, the typical flavors it will give. How would you describe it? You talk very briefly about a saison-like character, but can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Sure.
What is she giving you?
Well, yeah, that's it. It's interesting. So I would say that generally we ferment our house yeast in Fahrenheit between 70 and 75 degrees.
Yeah.
And it typically is, depending on how much yeast is in suspension, it will be the beer will, like, the more yeast that's in suspension, the more you'll get some of those classic saison flavors. You'll also get some of the kind of like Belgian notes, clove and banana sometimes. But when you lager and it's bright and clear, as it is on draft here in the brewery right now, it can be very clean. You get a lot more of the malt character.
Yeah.
I have had people kind of say that it tastes a lot like Blaugie. I have had some people say it also tastes like Franconian lagers. And so, like, the weird thing is that I was in Franconia with Tyler, our buddy Tyler Trotter, and we went to a bunch of these Franconian breweries, and I was down in the cellar and drinking these beers, and I was like, wait a minute, these are like hazy, very estery, spicy, phenolic lagers, and this is like crazy to me. And so when I got home, I started hopping the beers, our beers just a little bit more for a little bit more of like a bittering backbone, and so I kind of started getting that kind of quality of like that blurs that line between like a Franconian lager and a saison. But like that aside, I mean, I think like your Zina beer is like amazing, and I think it doesn't taste like your Zina beer, but it kind of falls into like a Venn diagram. It kind of tastes like that as well, a little bit.
Okay. Interesting.
Which is pretty cool. I mean, I think it's awesome.
All right. Excellent. Can you tell us how you use your cool ship? At what temperature you? Well, I suppose you send the word there directly after knockout, of course. But how long will you let it there? What is your target temperature for sending the wort to the fermenter? Is it depending on the season, on the outside temperature? How do you manage that? You have like protocols, rules, or how do you do?
I do. So when we knock out we go straight from the boil kettle and we knock out into the cool ship. The wort has already been, we've already used hops in the either first wort hopping or in the boil. And so I typically don't put any hops into the cool ship, although we've made beers with other breweries, like when we've done spontaneous with the Vale in Richmond. They like to put hops in the cool ship, so put hops in the cool ship.
Yeah.
And then we will leave it overnight. So it's typically sitting there from anywhere from 12 to 18 hours, depending on when I can get to it. And our cool ship is quite big. It was quite big. It got destroyed in a windstorm about 2 weeks ago. And yeah, it was very, very sad. But I actually filled it up today and it's holding water, knock on wood.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, Lane fixed it for the remaining of the season. So I had to do a little bit of a workaround this year, and the cool ships were very large stainless steel tanks that had very large open like manways on top, and so I'd only fill them part of the way, so that when I in the morning they were air temperature.
Okay.
So
And
the
you
cool ship.
always pitch at the same temperature, or is it depending on the type of beer?
That's a good question, Yvonne. So for all the beers that we do in-house, that's our like clean beer, the non-spontaneous, we have a heat exchanger. And so I just do all the beer with the heat exchanger.
Yeah. But for
The
the
cool ship is
spontaneous, you sometimes use different temperatures for it's not of course pitching, but for sending the beer to barrels or whatever, or it's just what the result you get in the morning when you wake up and I don't
yes.
know.
Yes. Yeah. One of the reasons why I want to do spontaneous in starting in like late February and then moving through March, it's really actually like trying to hit, March and then the weeks on either side of March, because I really like that temperature from like 38 to 47. That and so in Celsius, what is that going to be? That's going to be like, oh man, I don't have my conversion chart right now.
Me neither, but our audience will have understand. But okay, I think it's interesting for the people who listen to us to know that. Okay.
Yeah. So
cool.
so that, so there is a little bit of a temperature range. What I have been doing also, because I'm not always able to get the spontaneous from the cool ship straight into barrels immediately. And what's been really good for blending the wort too is that I'll move it into a holding tank for a period of about a week outside, and it sits outside, and it doesn't really ever, and that's a perfect time because it's staying out of the sun and staying nice and cold. And then moving it from the cool ship into that holding tank blends it up, so I get a much more even fermentation when it does start among all the barrels when I move the beer or the wort into the barrels.
Excellent. How long do you keep your barrels? For how many batches of beer you keep them in average?
Until they stop producing really good beer. So I still have 2 barrels from our original spontaneous batch in 2016.
Okay. And you see big differences from barrels to barrels, like the lambic producers see, or is it like an average flavor that you find in each of them?
I do. There are some barrels that really stand out, and so then I'll mark those barrels, and those will typically be the barrels that I will hold for to make the goose,
Mhm.
to let sit for a couple years. But yeah, there are some barrels that I get and they'll be like no acidity, lots of Brettanomyces character, some that are just like straight tart. And it's kind of that's kind of what I want. I don't get a lot of uniformity, but then that allows me to do a lot of different blending, which is
Yes, of course. Okay,
yeah.
excellent. And what kind of barrels are you using? What did they contain before?
They had red wine before, and they are when we acquire them, they are steam cleaned. So they're neutral at that point.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Good.
So, but it's an interesting question though, because like, Van and I have had this question. It's like, well, even if you're steam cleaning a barrel that's been used, of course there's going to be some like Saccharomyces in there, from whatever yeast the winery probably had been using for years and years and years.
Uh-huh.
So I don't know. It's interesting.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Your kettle is wood fired. What do you think it brings to your wort and to your beer?
Headaches.
Headaches for the brewer, probably.
Yeah.
For the
No, yeah,
customer.
not for the consumer.
All right. Is it a clear choice of yours, or it happened like that because you found that kettle and it was the easiest thing to do for you at that time? I don't know.
Yeah, well, so we did it originally because we thought that it was really cool to brew on wood fire. We just thought it was cool, right? So, and we knew that Caracol was brewing on wood fire, and so we said, "Hey, let's try to do that." But to brew inside with wood would be a nightmare in terms of like ventilation and having to build fireboxes and all that kind of stuff. And so it was actually through Marika and Aaron at Scratch. They turned us on to this really talented coppersmith that's in the southern part of Virginia, this guy, Elliot Muncie. And we said, hey, can you make us a boil kettle? And he said, sure. And then we said, well, can you make us a mash tun? He said, sure. And so we kind of just evolved by taking the brew house outside. Then we didn't have to worry about ventilation problems and getting permits, and probably going to stick my foot in at this point. But it's like you don't have to worry about ventilation problems when you go outside. So we originally went outside to test it, but then, as you know, with most things in life, once you do something that you think is really cool, it's really hard to go back to doing something that you don't think is as cool as the thing you just did.
Yeah.
So we were like, okay, well, there's no way we can now go back and be like, well, this beer is wood fired outside, but this one was not.
Yeah.
And so we just started doing everything outside. And then I would have to, for years and years and years, I had to always, arrange my brew days based on the weather. And then finally I said, wait a minute, why am I doing this? There's no bad conditions, just no bad gear, except for lightning, right? Because I don't want to deal with lightning. It's not good having like 400 gallons of boiling sugar water in a copper vessel to create like a giant battery.
Oh, for
So
sure.
like, yeah, so like so I was like, I made a promise to myself, just because as like almost like as an heuristic. I was like, I think this would be a really great thing for me to do, to just brew in all weather. And I don't know what I'm going to learn from it, but I will learn something and it'll make me a better brewer. And so I've been doing that, and I think it has made me a better brewer. I don't know how, but I feel like it.
Interesting. Well, it puts you even more in connection with all the elements and the environment surrounding you. So only that makes sense. I mean, so yeah, you're probably even more in connection with your product, I guess.
I think I think you're right, Yvan. I mean, we've had this conversation many times. I mean, the connection that I have with our yeast, I feel like it's a cosmic connection, and I feel like the yeast to a degree had input where it decided to how to decide it to manifest itself. And so I've told people, yeast wranglers here in the United States, like, and home brewers, if you want to use our yeast, you are welcome to propagate our yeast up with our bottles and stuff. But please, like, don't sell it. Like,
Yeah.
I'm happy to do give you any information that you want, help you with, any kind of brewing questions you may have. But the relationship that I have with our yeast is very special. And
I know
so
that.
when I'm out there, thanks. I mean, when I'm out there and I'm brewing and, it's windy or raining or it's snowing or the sun is out and I'm using the yeast, it feels really amazing because I know the air that I'm breathing has that yeast in the air that I'm actually breathing. But I was able to get into this partnership and this cooperation with it so that I've, channeled it, put it into our fermenters, and it makes this beer.
Yeah, excellent. Right. One day, actually, I think it was the year we met in a festival in Toronto. You showed me a crazy video with a wooden barrel full of beer and with like a geyser of hops coming out of it. Well, it was super beautiful and equally crazy to see. Can you tell us what that experience was?
Oh man, that was at Witch Stock, right? Up at
Yes. Yeah.
at Luke's festival.
Yep.
Yeah, that was, so we used to barrel ferment all of our like hoppy beers. And so when we would pitch, we would put hops into the wort for initial fermentation, and it was just exploding because the vigorousness of the fermentation itself. It was really great. I mean, barrel fermenting is great because it's such a soft way of fermenting. There's like no pressure on the yeast.
Yeah.
It creates a beautiful beer. And it also creates a total nightmare, especially if you're trying to like rack a beer with hops, with pellet hops, like out of a barrel and like into anything else. So yeah. Yeah, that was cool.
Yeah, it gives great videos for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Excellent.
But I don't think Yvonne, that was the first time. I think the first time we met is when you came to a show of ours when we were opening for Boris, and you brought some Terrace Bulba and you brought some of your spirits.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. You're better memory than me. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. Okay. I have maybe a last question. It's maybe an easy one, but I think it's the one that makes sense. You're a musician. You're a great musician. You guys have a great band that I had the pleasure to be able to watch. Do you see links between those two activities, like making beer and making music, and what kind of links is it?
I think it's a great question. I think that I think it comes down to like being an artist is not like a special title that somebody gets to get because they've written a book or put out an album or write a poem or make a sculpture or whatever their form is. I think being an artist is a sensitivity to the expression of what it means to be alive and how to express that. And so that can manifest itself in pretty much any way you want it to be. And so the inspiration that I pull from being an artist or being a musician, in one expression, it will be music. In another expression, it will be the act of creating the beer. So in my mind, there are two different outlets for the same creative impulse that I have as a sentient, like as a Homo sapiens that's interfacing with reality. And it's a wonderful thing to wake up every morning and say, like, how do I want to take this form, this art form that I've chosen at this time and place, and push that to express more of like what it means to be in direct contact experience.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you very much. And as well as I often say, beer and philosophy goes very well together, and you proved it to us today. And thank you for that. We have had a very interesting, informative, and as I said, refreshing conversation because of your refreshing approach, and really thank you for that. Jennings will be back on the next episode of this show as the host, having a conversation with a brewer of his choosing. That will be on the air in 2 weeks, so make sure you tune in for that. Visit allaboutbeer.com and follow on social media. And to support journalism in the beer space, check out patreon.com/allaboutbeer. I'm Yvan De Baets of Belgium's Brasserie de la Seine. Thank you for listening to the Brewer to Brewer podcast. Cheers, guys.
First Tea is a proud sponsor of the Brewer to Brewer podcast. First Tea invites you to explore the rich and versatile world of teas and botanicals, including osmanthus flowers. Email info@firsttea.com, that's FIRSDTEA, for support in choosing the right botanicals and the optimal ways to use them.
Ironheart Canning is the quality leader in mobile canning and much more. With a decade of packaging experience, Ironheart is your turnkey solution for all your canning needs. Are you looking for a unique can size or nitro dosing? Ironheart offers filling sizes from 6 ounce up to 19.2, dedicated equipment for mixed culture products, and nitro dosing capabilities for still beverages and beer. Looking to break into other beverage segments? Look no further. Ironheart also provides a robust network of co-packing solution to get a variety of beverages in cans, both alcoholic and non-alcoholic alike. Ironheart Canning. You have the capability because Ironheart can do it for you. Visit them at ironheartcanning.com or email info@ironheartcanning.com.
For more than a decade, the Beer Law Center has been dedicated to the craft beverage industry, meeting the legal needs of breweries, wineries, distilleries, and all manner of alcohol producers and sellers around the country. From company formation to federal and state licensing, trademarks, regulations, and compliance, or if you're buying or selling an alcohol business, the Beer Law Center should be your first call. The firm never charges for an initial consultation, and if they can't help you, they'll help you find someone that can. Have a legal question? Contact the Beer Law Center on social media at Beer Law Center and online at beerlawcenter.com.
Malteurop Malting Company is based in North America, specializing in growing and producing quality malts for the craft beer and distilling industries. With local farms and malt houses spread across the United States, Canada, and Mexico, MMC's commitment to excellence is fully ingrained into every batch it produces, ensuring breweries and distilleries of any size can create the finest beverages on the planet. Visit malteuropemaltingco.com to learn how Malteurop can support your malting needs. Or you can contact them at customer success@malteurope.com or call 844-546-MALT for questions or to place your order. Malteurop, premium grains from field to flavor.